Morning, Division 2, continuing Chapter 17 of Trevor Noah's autobiography. This, by the way, is the last chapter in the book, and of course he saved the best for last. So, of course, the chapter's entitled My Mother's Life, and he goes right back to the very beginning to present day. That's why this chapter is so long. At the end, there's some history of apartheid, which I will read to you as well, if you guys would like that. And I know a few of you are definitely interested in this history, so we'll get to that eventually. So continuing chapter 17 where we left off. That was the turning point, when my mother started making more money and getting her independence back. That's when we saw the dragon emerge. The drinking got worse. Of course, they're referring to his stepdad, Abel. The drinking got worse. He grew more and more violent. It wasn't long after coming for me in the pantry that Abel hit my mom for the second time. I can't recall the details of it because now it's muddled with all the other times that came after it. I do remember that the police were called. They came out to the house this time, but again, it was just like the boys' club. No report was made, no charges were filed. Whenever he'd hit her or come after me, my mom would find me crying afterwards and take me aside. She'd give me the same talk every time. Pray for Abel, she'd say, because he doesn't hate us. He hates himself. To a kid, this makes no sense. Well, if he hates himself, I'd say, why doesn't he kick himself? Abel kicked the dogs too. Fifi mostly. Panther was smart enough to stay away. But dumb, lovable Fufi, sorry I got her name wrong, was forever trying to be Abel's friend. She'd cross his path or be in his way when he'd had a few, and he'd give her a boot. After that, she'd go and hide somewhere for a while. Fufi getting kicked was always the warning sign that stuff was about to get worse. The dogs and the workers in the yard often got the first taste of his anger, and that would let the rest of us know to lie low. We'd usually go find Fufi wherever she was hiding and be with her. The strange thing was that when Fufi got kicked, she never yelped or cried. When the vet diagnosed her as deaf, he also found out that she had some condition where she didn't have a fully developed sense of touch. She didn't feel pain, which was why she would always start over with Abel like it was a new day. He'd kick her, she'd hide, and then she was right back the next morning wagging her tail. Hi, I'm here. I'll give you another chance. And he always got the second chance. The Abel who was likable and charming never went away. He had a drinking problem, but he was a nice guy. We had a family. Growing up in a house of abuse, you struggle with the notion that you can love a person that you hate or hate a person that you love. It's a very strange feeling. You want to live in a world where someone is good or bad, where you either hate them or love them, but that's not how people are. There was an undercurrent of terror that ran through the house, but the actual beatings themselves were not that frequent. I think if they had been, the situation would have ended sooner. Ironically, the good times in between were what allowed it to drag out and escalate as far as it did. He hit my mom once, then the next time, the next time was 3 years later, and it was just a little bit worse. Then it was 2 years later, and just a little bit worse. Then it was a year later, and just a little bit worse. It was sporadic enough that you'd think it wouldn't happen again, but it was frequent enough that you never forgot that it was possible. One afternoon, I came home from Sandringham, and my mom was very upset and worked up. This man is unbelievable, she said. What happened? He bought a gun. What? A gun? What do you mean he bought a gun? My mom said she'd confronted Abel about it, and he'd gone off on some nonsense about the world needing to learn to respect him. He thinks he is the policeman of the world, she said, and that's the problem with the world. We have people who cannot police themselves, so they want to police everybody else around them. Not long after that, I moved out. The atmosphere had become toxic for me. It was also just time for me to go. Regardless of Abel, our plan had always been for me to move out after school. My mother never wanted me to be like my uncle, one of those men who is unemployed and still living at home with his mother. She helped me get my flat, and I moved out. The flat was only 10 minutes away from our house, so I was always around to drop in to help with errands or have dinner once in a while. But most important, whatever was going on with Abel, I didn't have to be involved. At some point, my mom moved to a separate bedroom in the house, and from there, then on, they were married only in name, not even cohabitating, but coexisting. That state of affairs lasted a year, maybe two. Andrew had turned 9, and in my world, I was counting down until he turned 18, thinking that would finally free my mom from this abusive man. Then, one afternoon, my mom called and asked me to come by the house. A few hours later, I popped by. "Trevor," she said, "I'm pregnant." Sorry, what? "I'm pregnant." "What?" Good Lord. I was furious. I was so angry. She herself seemed resolute, as determined as ever, but with an undertone of sadness I had never seen before, like the news had devastated her at first, but she'd since reconciled herself to the reality of it. "How could you let this happen?" "Abel and I, we made up. I moved back into the bedroom." "So you're going to stay with this man another 18 years? Are you crazy, Mom?" "God spoke to me, Trevor. He told me, 'Patricia, I don't do anything by mistake. There is nothing I give you that you cannot handle. I'm pregnant for a reason. I know what kind of kids I make. I know what kind of sons I can raise. I can raise this child. I will raise this child." 9 months later, Isaac was born. She called him Isaac because in the Bible, Sarah gets pregnant when she's like 100 years old and she's not supposed to be having children, and that's what she names her son. My mom, was 44. Isaac's birth pushed me even further away. I visited less and less. Then I popped by one afternoon and the house was in chaos. There was police cars out front, the aftermath of another fight. He'd hit her with a bicycle. Abel had been berating one of his workers in the yard, and my mom had tried to get in between them. Abel was furious that she'd contradicted him in front of an employee, so he picked up Andrew's bike and beat her with it. Again, she called the police, and the cops who showed up this time actually knew Abel. He fixed their cars. They were pals. No charges were filed. Nothing happened. That time I confronted him. I was big enough now. "You can't keep doing this," I said. "This is not right." "I know," he said. "But you know how your mom is. She came and disrespected me in front of my workers. I can't have these other men looking at me like that. I can't have these other men looking at me like I don't know how to control my own wife." After the bicycle, my mom hired contractors she knew through the real estate business to build her a separate house in the backyard, like a little servant's quarters, and she moved there with Isaac. "This is the most insane thing I have ever seen," I told her. "This is all I can do," she said. "The police won't help me. The government won't protect me. Only my God can protect me. But what I can do is use against him the one thing that he cherishes, and that is his pride. By me living outside in a shack, everyone will know that something is wrong with him. He's a saint in the streets. He's a devil in the house. Let him be seen for who he really is." When my mom had decided to keep Isaac, I was so close to writing her off. I couldn't stand the pain anymore. But seeing her hit with a bicycle, living like a prisoner in her own backyard, was the final straw for me. I was done. My mom understood. She didn't feel betrayed or abandoned. "Honey, I know what you're going through," she said. "At one point, I had to disown my own family to go off and live my own life too. I understand why you need to do the same. So I did. I walked out. I didn't call. I didn't visit. Isaac, he came and went, and for the life of me, I could not understand why she wouldn't do the same. Leave. Just leave. Eventually, she did leave. What prompted her to leave was the final breaking point. I have no idea what it was, but it happened. I was gone. I was off becoming a comedian, touring the country, playing shows in England, hosting radio shows, hosting television shows. I moved in with my cousin, I'm going to get it wrong, Lungizi, and made my own life separate from hers. I couldn't invest myself anymore because it would have broken me into too many pieces. But one day, she bought another house in Highlands North, met someone new, and moved on with her life. Andrew and Isaac still saw their dad, who by that point was just existing in the world, still going through the same cycle of drinking and fighting, still living in a house paid for by his ex-wife. Years passed. Life carried on. Then one morning I was in bed around 10 a.m. and my phone rang. It was on a Sunday. I know it was on a Sunday because everyone else in the family had gone to church, and I, quite happily, had not. The days of endlessly schlepping back and forth to church were no longer my problem, and I was lazily sleeping in. I looked over at my phone. It was flashing my mom's number, but when I answered, it was Andrew on the other end. He sounded perfectly calm. Hey, Trevor, it's Andrew. Hey, how are you? Good, what's up? Are you busy? Sort of sleeping. Why? Mom has been shot. Okay, so there were two strange things about the call. First, why would he ask me if I was busy? Let's start there. When your mom's been shot, the first line of out of your mouth should be, Mom's been shot, not, how are you? Not, are you busy? That confused me. The second weird thing was when he said, Mom's been shot. I didn't ask who shot her because I didn't have to. Where are you now? I said. We're at Linksfield Hospital. Okay, I'm on my way. I jumped out of bed, ran down the corridor, and banged on Lungizi's door. Dude, my mom's been shot. She's in the hospital. He jumped out of bed too, and we got in the car and we raced to the hospital, which luckily was only 15 minutes away. At that point, I was upset but not terrified. Andrew had been so calm on the phone. I was thinking, she must be okay. It must not be that bad. I called him back from the car to find out more. Andrew, what happened? We were on our way home from church, he said, totally calm, and Dad was waiting for us at the house. And he got out of his car and started shooting. But where? Where did he shoot her? He shot her in the leg. Oh, okay, I said, relieved. And then he shot her in the head. When he said that, my body just let go. I remember the exact traffic light that I was at. For a moment, there was a complete vacuum of sound, and then I cried tears like I had never cried before. I collapsed in heaving sobs and moans. It was an expression of raw pain. She was my mom. She was my teammate. It had always been me and her together. Me and her against the world. I broke into two. The light changed. I couldn't even see the road. But I drove through the tears thinking, just get there, just get there, just get there. We pulled up to the hospital and I jumped out of the car. There was an outdoor sitting area by the entrance to the emergency room. Andrew was standing there waiting for me alone, his clothes smeared with blood. Wow, Div 2, I hate to leave you guys on that note, but we will finish this later. This is getting to be quite the story, isn't it? Hopefully it wasn't too disturbing for you guys. I know I'm feeling it a little bit myself. Take care. We'll continue in a few days.